Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Data Science Leaders Podcast. I am your host, Dave Cole, and today's guest is Indy Mondal. Indy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Dave. How are you?
Great. It's a Friday, so I'm excited to end the day on a great note. I'm very pumped about today's episode. So Indy is the Senior Director of Data Science, AI, and Product Insights at DocuSign. He also played a similar role at both Hulu and Getty Images. And there's a few things we're going to be talking today with Indy about. The first is using data science to form strategy. So one of the things we've touched on a bit in the Data Science Leaders podcast is what role, how proactive should data science leaders be in helping to form strategy instead of being sort of reactive and helping to validate strategy. The next thing we'll talk about is using models to drive efficiency. Indy's got a lot of experience there, and we'll learn more about what that means when we get there. And then last but not least, the role of self-serve in data science. So what role should a data science leader play in standing up sort of a self-serve mechanism for users? Let's start right at the top. So what are your opinions on Indy on the role of data science to help formulate strategy?
Yeah, excellent question, Dave. Look, data should always be the foundations and guide rails for any successful business strategy, right? Oftentimes it entirely depends on the role the data science leader play to establish the expectation and leadership within the organization. And you are right. Oftentimes, what I've seen in the industry, data science become more of a support or validation of strategy rather than someone driving the strategy.
Mm-hmm.
But to be able to establish that role effectively, it requires a lot of effort from the data science leader to drive evangelization and thought leadership. And not only that, establish the structure of the organization in a way to be the strategic partner of business rather than the support organization. And so there is various ways you can build a data science or a data organization. There are various models, and the way I think about it, there are primarily two sort of bucket, if you will, that you can build your organization. One is a support or a delivery organization, or second, as an organization that focus on building strategic partnerships, strategic product and capability for business. The first model is very much focused on the what part and in optimizing on supporting business need and ad hoc requests as they come in, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the second one requires sort of a very product and strategic mindsets where you are partnering with the business at the strategic level to understand the why, not so much the what, and then building product and capability to drive the business. So with the first model, it is really hard for data organization to be strategic in both in its own work as well as establishing it as a strategic partner to the business. Let's spend some time understand that on that why.
Mm-hmm.
Say Dave, you are a new data science leader. You join a company. You're starting to build a team. You hire few data folks, and you suddenly started getting requests from the business, right? Someone came to you, said, "Can you build me a dashboard? Can you build me a model?" Great. You did a very good job in terms of developing those. Suddenly, business started seeing the impact that you drive. You started getting more requests, right? You delivered those. And what happens after some times, because you are delivering these individual requests as they come in, you suddenly started getting so many requests. The only way we could scale is to hire more data scientists.
Mm-hmm.
And then you started hiring project manager to do manage all these requests. And not only that, because you ended up building so many artifacts like your dashboards and models, you now have to manage, support all of those, right? And you start to get to a point where you're buried in your own sort of artifacts and a request coming in, and you have very little time to be strategic.
Right.
On the other hand, think about the possibility, what would happen, you still would have to do at the beginning, like you're still reacting to the business, but at some point you pivot. Instead of reacting to the business, you start to meet them and start to ask why, right? And you trying to understand the commonality between all these, somewhat disparate requests and figure out what are the core things that you need to build to support all of those. And So that's where I think as a data science leader, you can always try to be, if you really want to be strategic, where you are trying to think, instead of building 100 model, 100 dashboard, I'm building only a set of core capability that I can support effectively, which can be extended in the future. And I'm really treating all those as a product and capability rather than individual request, right? And I'll give you an example, again, from what we do here in DocuSign. A big part of what I do in DocuSign is to support product data science. And in my previous, life, generally this is how product data science I've seen work, right? I mean, a product manager is launching a product and he's like, hey, India, can I need some metrics, right? Or I've launched a product and I say, hey, can you tell me why my product is not doing well, right? So you started looking into, you realize, you know what, we actually never captured the telemetry to begin with, right? We never even defined what success metrics needs to be that defines the success of the product, right? So you are asked to do something at the end of and at that time you're reacting, you're just supporting a PM with the request. What we have done here in DocuSign, we partner with the PM at the planning process. Right. And this is like all of my data scientists in my team, the product manager, data product manager. So they're partnering with the product manager at the planning process. Even before we get any request, we sit down to understand what product is building and how we define success for this product. And is there a target that we can set? And once we do that, we start to look into, do we need to build telemetry? What sort of telemetry we need to capture? What pipeline needs to build? What, dashboard needs to build? And what we have done over the last, my period here in DocuSign, we have turned all of those into a product. So we now have an instrumentation system that has a very, we enforce schema so that we can always capture data in a certain way, right? Our pipeline is scalable and extensible. We actually have a product that we call a launch dashboard. So no matter what product goes, is there. So think about it. Instead of reacting to all the product manager in a one-on-one basis, we actually ended up building a set of product and set of practice that allow us to be a lot more strategic. And I think this is what you can do as a data science leader to sort of signal to your business that you actually not here just to support them, but you are here as a thought leader and meet them at the very beginning. And today, my organization in DocuSign partner with product manager almost all, new product strategy, supporting existing product and how we think about evolving those products. And to me, your question about how one can think about being more strategic, to me, it's all about how you build your organization as a leader and what sort of, expectation and structure you're putting in place that allow your team to be strategic, but, otherwise you'll end up being reactive all the time. So I don't know if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of good stuff to unpack there. So, let me try to summarize as best I can. So, based on what you've seen historically, there's kind of two approaches that a data science leader can take. One is to be a little bit more in a support role. So I hesitate to use this phrase, but like a little bit of an order taker, right? So somebody who says like, hey, if you have a question, we have answers. You bring us the questions. We'll put together a deck. We'll put together a dashboard. We'll build a model. We'll help you get your answers. Like the second approach, and the preferred approach clearly by you, is to play more of a strategic role, play more of a partner sort of role, a thought leader role. And your recommendation is to establish that ideally in the very early days. So if you're a new leader within an organization, new DSL within an organization, like you should try your best to set up those partnerships, be involved early in the planning process as a new product, before a product is being launched. So you can, hopefully stave off things like, missing, if there's a certain thing that the PM would like to have measured, let's make sure that we're capturing that, that data element so that it actually can be measured, and that we're not having to, to wait around for that data element to be added to the telemetry so that you actually get that question answered. That's a small example, right? Of why you want to be involved.
Right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think if I want to wrap it in like, 2 sentences, it starts with you're always asking why, right? Don't worry about the what. Go ask why. And second, make sure you as a leader are making, like, you need to do a lot of legwork with your peers and your leadership to establish sort of the, like, what data science bring on the table and how you work with the leadership, right? So don't wait for work to come to you. Go meet your leadership and define the work at that level so that, another example I'll quickly give you, one of my past job, we had so many dashboards that the data team has built. We actually had to build an internal product just so that you can search the dashboard, right?
So you have so many dashboards, you needed to build a dashboard to find the dashboard that you needed. Is that
right? And we had to build a full stack, product to be able to do that, because we need to have CSM, like, content management system. We need to have, like, it was a month of process building that, because we have dashboard in Tableau, in MicroStrategy, in this.
Yeah.
You don't have to do that, right? But if you start focusing on building the capability rather than one of things, you will never get there. And I think this is what I've seen data science and data team fall into this. Like, you have so many of these artifacts, you're pretty much drowning in it.
Yeah. And we've all seen it, right? The sprawl of reports and dashboards and even models too. And if you're not involved in understanding the why, like, why are this dashboard getting created, you're probably not going to have a very good idea as to how long its lifespan should exist as a dashboard. Like, when it's time to retire it and move on and replace it, how it should be improved. I think what you're putting your finger on is, as a data scientist and as a data science leader, you need to be more proactive. You need to really understand the business. And if you're just sort of taking the orders, I can imagine the back and forth, right, is going to be much longer, right? Because you're not truly understanding what they're getting at. You're not asking, the question behind their question so that they can, because, you're a data scientist, most likely they're not, maybe they understand a little bit of your world, maybe you understand a little bit of theirs, but to truly understand their world, you have to partner closely, right? And then you can
and you also have to spend time educating your business owner, right? Because, not everybody is data literate, right? Oftentimes a business has come to me and said, Indy, can you set a target for, like, this product? Can you set a target? And I said, no, as a data science team, we don't set target, right? We provide you guidance, forecast, guide rail.
Right. We can forecast. Yeah.
Right. And it is the business who understand their priority and, of the year and the initiative that marry the forecast or the, guidance we have given to come to the target. But that's an education, right?
Right.
The last thing I would say, and this is, might be controversial, if you have a data science organization and if you have too many project managers in your team, you're probably doing the first model I've said. But if you have a organization where you have data product manager, you are probably a lot more strategic and focusing on the second type of the organization I just mentioned.
Okay. So if you have too many, that's a really salient point. So if you have project managers with a J, and you have a lot of those, and you're probably in the support organization. So you have product with a D managers on your team, sort of data science product managers. Is that right?
Yeah.
That's great. So how would you define their day-to-day? Like, what does their world look like?
Yeah, so the data product manager in my team, they're constantly meeting with our stakeholder as they come in, and their job is to understand not the want, but the need, right? They are trying to figure out, right, all the requests that are coming in, we're meeting with them. Okay, what's the pain point? What are we trying to solve? They understand the business really well and figuring out the actual business need, and then able to draw between all these requests that are coming in so that we are able to come up with a set of use cases and capability, that goes into building this product or capability rather than like, many small projects or many small one-off deliverable. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that does make sense. So, I mean, one thing I'm hearing though, like, let me push on this a little bit, is that is that, by getting closer to, the business, or in this case, the product manager, who's building a new feature, by getting closer to them, you understand a little bit of the world, so you can understand, the types of data elements that you need, the types of models that you need, what needs to be measured, what types of analytics need to be performed. But like, there's a difference between and that is super helpful, but there's a difference between that and then actually being someone who's setting the strategy, right? So then, maybe for you as a leader, are you ever turning around and saying, you know what, we've been building a lot of products in this area, but I think that there's a whole other area of opportunity over here, and I think we really need to be doubling down on this product based on what I'm seeing. So do you actually meet with the head of product and form product direction?
And I think that's a very good point. I mean, this is what I was trying to say at the beginning, right? This is what exactly my team does right now. I mean, once you get out of this constantly reacting and you actually have time in your data science who can do the exploratory work, right? I can go and talk about strategy, but I need to go there with some data, and evidence to back it up, right? So this is where my team spend a lot of time doing deep dive analysis so that we can take that to business, and we've done that multiple times in the last 2 years in DocuSign, presenting to, head of products, and look, this is what we've been observing, right? And that turns into, and I think this is what, to be really honest, as a data science driving strategy, your job is to bring up these things that no one is seeing, right? And use that as an example, as a foundation to start having the conversation. Look, this is the thing, we're seeing bottleneck here. This product that we've launched we're really seeing not enough adoption, right? And this is why we think that is, right? And then taking that and you can do that two way. One, you can wait for the head of product to come back and say, Indy, can you tell me? Or you can build a data science organization who actually focusing on understanding this, because they have bandwidth to do this deep dive and going back to the product leaders proactively and having those conversations. And what I like to do with my team is to the second, that we are constantly doing that. I mean, the other thing, one example, and I think this is going to be pretty resonant with most data leaders. If you think about COVID, COVID is something that no one has ever seen in their life before. So there was no empirical data or empirical things to fall back.
Right.
The only way, and at least here in DocuSign, we worked with our product team and engineering team almost on a daily basis, because the only thing we had to understand what's happening and to drive the business, because we don't even know if it is normal or not, right? It's to be data driven, right? And we spent a lot of time in the last 2 years, and even now, if you think about it, when you are trying to build a strategy for next year, as any product, I mean, Peloton is a classic example. It's all over the news. How do you forecast demand? How do you build a strategy for? I mean, is it because generally you see my demand is going up, and you're gonna make some assumption, but people actually bought more than they want to consume. So you have this years of demand that's been pulled in, and only way you can be really successful when your data team is actually working closely with the product. And and we spend a lot of time understanding how to get rid of the entire outlier, that is the one data point, two data point, months of data point, to be able to go into build a model that allow us to normalize that, right? So we do a lot of those work with our product team, with our business team, only because we are able to meet them at the strategic level and not just reacting to their one-off request.
I love it. I think it sets the bar for what a data science leader should do, and if you're not doing it today, what you should aspire to do. I think it's not too late. This is my editorial here, but I don't think it's too late. I mean, I think it is harder, right? If to your point, if you build an organization that's predominantly support in nature, you have a large PM organization, let's say, just handling the intake of requests. It is hard to maybe at that point to sort of change hearts and minds. It's much easier to set it at the outset. However, I don't think it's too late, all right, to start having those strategic conversations to change maybe how you work with your business counterparts, get involved earlier in the process, start asking questions like why, asking questions behind the question, and then you can start building that rapport, right? And then before long, you'll be starting. You'll be invited to some of those early meetings, right? And you'll be invited to those strategic meetings, and obviously come with your own opinions too. Look at the data, within your organization, and come with your own opinions. I think that's another way to build rapport. Well, cool. Well, I wanted to move on to our next topic. I just, have written down use models to drive efficiency, but I know you have more to say about that as it pertains to sort of product analytics. Like, tell me what you mean by that.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you and I were having the conversation before, generally what I try to say, like, a model performance doesn't result into a product success. A lot of the time, right, as a data science team or AI team, we, rightfully so, right? One of the things that we really focus on, like, how accurate is our model, right? What's our precision call, recall, F1 score, confusion metrics, you name it, right? But you can't really be, that doesn't always result into a successful product, right? Because a product is driven by customer experience and usability. So one of the things that I fundamentally believe that you cannot really develop a successful AI solution without having the clear understanding and the context of the customer, how the customer would be using the product or solution within, right? So it's, you make any model, the output of that should just make sense to customer intuitively, right? It just have to work, right? And that's one of the things I want to do with my data team, right? I want to make sure my data team, spend time understanding the customer problem, their use cases and context. And to do so, right, you need to understand that all the product or model actually at the end of the day result into customer doing something with it, right? The question is, what is that, right? And can you start measuring on top of your model metrics a set of customer success and business success metrics that align to that customer efficiency gain or the business impact, right? So generally I'll give you a little bit of how I do in my team, and then I'll give you a couple of examples. So one of the things that we do, right, in my team, besides the model performance metrics, we also measure both qualitative and quantitative metrics from a product perspective. So yes, you can measure your F1 score, your precision recall and confusion metrics to understand how good the model is. But now you start to understand how that translates to customers. So one of the things is obviously qualitative metrics. You make sure you're constantly getting in-product feedback, however you're doing it, that from the customer, are they finding it useful? But that's on a qualitative sense, right?
And how are you getting that feedback? Is that like, surveys? Like how are you getting that type of feedback?
Yeah, I mean, it depends, right? I mean, the most easy way for you to do that, like some sort of preset or a CSAT, right? You have a in-product survey that pops out, you use an experience, the make sure to capture that when they are done using that, like, how was it, right? And the second was trying to define sort of, a set of measurable success metrics. So if your goal is to, at the end of the day, develop efficiency or a productivity gain for the customer, can you actually define a matrix that can measure that, right? And then instrument your product in a way that you're collecting that so that you can, train and optimize that. And second, on the same quantity, can you, and many times it's true for us in a B2B sense, like any model that you're putting into a product that has to result into some sort of business impact. So is there a business metrics? It could be one of your, conversion metrics, depending on what we're doing, right? It could be click through, add to cart, add to watch list if you're a media company, whatever that is. Like, can you tie the model performance to that? I mean, if you can do that, then you're building truly a successful product. I mean, and to me, for my team, when we're working on any model, I want to make sure we're not being only lopsided and thinking one end, like, okay, mathematically, this model is so sound, it's giving me 95% accuracy, but if it doesn't really translate to customer experience, it's not going to be a good product. I'll give you two examples. There's a media company that I know very well, had built a content recommendation system. And I tell this story to everybody. But, the model was really good, but it didn't do well with the viewers. It was very high performant model, but it actually was not able to deliver the engagement or consumption that we're looking for. So when we started digging in why, it turned out the model that was developed for the US market by a team who was in a different country. So they didn't have the understanding of the pop culture we have in US, right? So which means the output often lacked the contextual awareness and the relevance, and it didn't always make sense to the user. So if you think about that, right, you still have a model which is really high performant, but it didn't do well in the product because there are additional things we had to measure we didn't measure.
Right. So this is interesting because I think most data science leaders, like to your point, like they just care about the accuracy of the model. Like that's what they're when they think hey, this is what I need to when I need to retrain a model. It's typically because the accuracy of the model has gone down, and if your model is a content recommendation system, the accuracy is basically based on is like, I guess, the top item that you're recommending actually being clicked on and viewed. I think your point though is that models are embedded in products as well, and
That's
you
right.
need to think about the entire product experience. Like you don't just think about don't just think of your job very narrowly as just being this cog in a larger machine where you're just responsible for recommending the top 10 pieces of content they should view next. Instead, you need to be making also seeing like is that overall experience is what the maybe they are searching finding that top item is spot on, but the other 9 are like completely irrelevant and useless, and the users are seeing those and they're getting frustrated and they don't want to actually use it anymore, the content recommendation system, because of other factors that you haven't thought of. So surveying the users and thinking about the user experience, that's not just the PM's job, that's not just like a product manager's job, that's also your job, right? Is to understand.
And also defining the product metrics, like when you're defining the product metrics, and sometimes depending on how your organization is structured, it could be your job, could not be, because there might be a different product analytics team who's doing it. But as a data team, you have to have some understanding of how the product is going to be considered a success. What's the metrics, right? And to me, this is as a leader, and this is sort of the DNA you have to build in your team. If you are not doing this, it really doesn't matter. Your product is ultimately failed. And if the product failed, it doesn't matter how successful my model is. We actually haven't been successful as a team, right?
Right.
And if you are a data science leader or any data leader, you have to think end to end.
Yep.
And to me, I've seen a lot of them fail in my life, and I'm very careful now. Anytime wherever I go, like, great, what is the impact to the customer, and what considered it success from a customer point of view, and can you define that? Maybe it's already defined. If it is, great. Make sure when you are training your model, right, and testing it, you also test that part.
Yep.
Right, because you can do that, right?
Yeah, you might have multiple dependent variables in a sense, to think about here. Well, that's great. Let's move. Like, I think there's a general theme here, right? Which is, don't think narrowly, broaden your scope. Think about the business. Think about the customer. Don't just think that your team is there to churn out models or dashboards. Think about the business. Last but not least, speaking of the business, I want to talk a little bit about how you view self-serve in data science. We already have heard some pretty strong opinions with you around the job of a data science team needs to extend beyond just support, being a support organization. But I would think that maybe you'd be interested in setting up, self-service. Like that might help allow you to be more strategic, right? If you are actually
Right.
standing up a self-serve sort of arm. So what recommendations do you have there?
Yeah, and I think this is something that we talk about a lot in my team because every time you hire a data scientist, every data scientist that I know wants to work on the coolest data science and ML
Yeah.
problem, right? We heard all these things. The 90% of data science to life spent in like plumbing, like all those
Right.
things
Yeah.
true, right?
Yeah. Data engineering.
And
Yeah.
the only way you can get out of it, I mean, if you think about your analytics maturity, you go from this descriptive, reporting to all the way ML and AI. You
Hmm.
can only The only way you could go there if you can somehow automate or make self-service the rest of it, right? So one of the things, and the reason I have such a strong product focus in my data team, that's one of the reason because I want to make sure that we're building product that drive self-service. My product managers are understanding how we define like what's the success metrics for the product that we're building, so the adoption and all those things,
Hmm.
right? We have SLAs. The goal is we build, instead of hundreds of dashboard, a set of core product and capabilities, right? Like in the past, my engineering team, generally you have a data team, your data engineering team is building pipeline. I
Hmm.
hate, in a strong word, that my engineering team build pipeline. I would rather build, services that other people can just build pipeline, right? Like it is to think about more like, and I think it's also a shift from a 10 years ago, right? 10 years, everything was like at the data teams, you have all these people, ETL developer, people are building pipeline, and I think modern data organization think about it as a product organization, building capabilities, and also services that can sort of they're modular, but also they can talk to each other in a programmatic way, right? So if you're building a model, right, in your data science, make sure that you have a set of exposed interface that can other people can consume from,
Hmm.
right? So that's a one level of self-service. You're building dashboards for business to do self-service. So if I get to a point where I don't have to do any of this 80% question that come on a daily basis, and we can either automate that or create self-service, you have your data scientists who are much more qualified to do that, have the time to do deep dive building models and be more strategic, which is really hard to do because they're focusing on all these things, like, hey, can you send me this data, can you send me that data,
Yeah. Yeah. I
right?
mean, when I hear self-service in the world of data science, I'm typically in my head, I'm thinking about, dashboards, but like what you reminded me of, it's not just, building out the end sort of presentation layer and making that self-serve. I think of BI tools and other things, but it's also the data itself. Like,
Data.
thinking like instead of, uh, asking for data and then have a data engineer build out some pipeline that creates a file or populates some table that you then need to use. Think more from a service oriented architecture sort of approach,
That's right.
thinking of like, holistically, what are all the data elements that somebody might need? And then how do you create an interface to make it more self-serve to allow the business users to actually be able to retrieve that data in a way that hopefully, keeps the data quality and data integrity very high and allows them to get to the right answers in a great way. Do I have that right?
Yeah, yeah, and I think the way to think about Dave is think end to end, right? I
Hmm.
mean, self-service doesn't really happen like dashboard is not self-service, right? That's just one thing.
Yeah.
Self-service means end to end. So you have self-service and your data capture layer, right? And again, I understand not every data science leader work into end to end, but I do.
Hmm.
So you are building capability for capturing your telemetry data, right? You're building capabilities self-service for pipelines. You're building self-service for your model, how those model interact with each other. Even when you're building models, um, if you are a data science who is constantly building model and you have lots of feature that you're constantly trained, your model,
Hmm.
think about turning those into some sort of a feature store
Feature
that
store.
other
Yeah.
people can, right?
Yep.
So that not other people have to do the same thing that you've been doing. So thinking about the entirety of the of your stack and not just the self-service means I need to have dashboard for the business. I mean, they are just one stakeholder. Make sure
Right.
that you're driving I mean, one of the things that I did back in the Hulu, and I do say Hulu. I mean, I own the experimentation practice, and in Hulu, there's my team build the experimentation platform and capability. We're doing that in Hulu. We're doing that in DocuSign as well, and we always talked about like our goal is to make sure we're building the platform in a way that first level of automation or the self-service goes to the engineering team who is actually sort of configuring the experiments.
Right.
Second layer, it goes to the analyst who is going to be doing that. So anybody in the company can do the experimentation analysis without us being in the picture. And the last, you build the capabilities where the product manager can launch their own experiments. It's not all going to happen in day one, right? But you're constantly thinking about self-serving from one layer to the next layer to next layer. And when all of it's done, you drop self-service for the entire system.
Right. That makes a ton of sense to me. I mean, I think it's a way to drive scale, right? As a team, like if your team instead said, no, like you send us the 27 experiments that you want to run and we'll go ahead and run them. Then you're going to be creating this massive organization, and you're probably going to have a lot of frustrated, PMs, engineers, et cetera, who are like, no, we know exactly what we need. Can you just like teach us how to fish, or give us the tools to fish, give us the rod and the reel and whatever. So building out that platform to me is a harder problem to solve, and probably a more interesting problem, I imagine, for your team to solve, but it also allows you to scale as an organization, and also gets, your your counterparts in other departments a lot closer to what you do, right? As well. So I think it sounds like a win-win. It also sounds like it's harder to do. But I think, sorry, go ahead.
It's also more rewarding. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Tell me one thing, right? I mean, if you have to hire now, like if you have to scale and your definition of scale is going to hire more people, where are you going to hire all these people from?
Yeah.
Like
these days, yeah, good luck.
Right. It's hiring is so tough. And then the second thing is, right, think about the modern business doesn't have that sort of time that the businesses 10 years ago. Like if somebody comes to you like, Indy, I need to understand this, you cannot really tell them, come back in a month, let me build a pipeline. Like you have to react because, in 2 weeks, the business would have moved on, right? How you respond to the modern business with the speed of the business, with the speed of the data and the quantity of the data, you can't really scale. If our solution is, it's the people who's going to scale it. I always try to figure out how can I do more with the less amount of people, because that's the way you can scale.
Yeah, I think if your only approach is to try to scale by just hiring more, at least I don't know about you, Indy, but personally, I'm ready to go interstellar in my recruiting efforts to try to find people. I think the market out there is pretty darn crazy. It's so
hard.
Yeah. So I think you're taking the right approach. It's smart for these times. I also think, to your point, it's more rewarding. Hey, I really enjoyed our conversation. We touched on a whole bunch of topics. I learned a lot. I for one would love to join your team. It sounds like, based on what I heard today, it sounds very interesting. If people want to reach out to you, can they hit you up on LinkedIn and say hello?
Yeah, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm very, very responsive and active in LinkedIn. I'll love to chat to any of you who would like to reach out to me.
Awesome. Well, Indy, it was a pleasure. Have a great weekend and take care.
All right. Thanks a lot, Dave. Have a good weekend, you too.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.